Welcome, everyone, to the Black Man in Islam conference hosted by Ministry to Muslims. I am your host, Kevin Briggins, Managing Director for the Center for Biblical Unity. We are going to move on to our next guest, our next speaker. It is our brother, KOREDE Olawoyin. I hope I'm saying that right. But KOREDE is a Christian apologist. He has been engaging Muslims for more than a decade. He has moderated and even been involved in dialoguing with Muslims through the platform of Love a Muslim Ministry. He has been invited to speak at seminaries, churches, and special group trainings. And he also takes part as a facilitator at a yearly specialized Muslim evangelism training. He has been one of the, he's been asked to speak at seminaries and many other forums. And so without further ado, brother, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Brother Kelvin, for the job well done doing this. Again, I want to appreciate Pastor George for giving me the privilege to actually present on this particular issue. It's been something that has been very, very dear to my heart, especially being in Nigeria, talking about the issue of genocide in my own country, Nigeria. Again, I want to thank everyone who is involved in this particular setup. I say that may the Lord reward your labor of love in Jesus' name. So I'm going to be sharing my slide right now. We're going to be talking about genocide in Nigeria. Again, it's an emotional discussion, but then it's really worth it because a couple of things have been said about genocide in Nigeria. But what I'm going to be doing tonight is to lay the information straight, okay, especially being opportune to go to some of the places where these things have happened. And I'm going to be taking a look at historically and also look at how this all ties to the Islamic religion as well. All right, so again, I'm going to be talking about, genocide in Nigeria. But you see, the first question we need to ask is there genocide of Christians in Nigeria? Now, I know a couple of people asking that question because there's been a lot of information online. Some are saying that indeed there is Christian genocide in Nigeria, while some are saying that no, there is nothing like that. Okay, it's a sort of misinformation. So people are undecisive and they do not really know what is going on. And this platform is an opportunity to be able to talk about this and make a decision for that particular case. So before we even talk about this issue of genocide, maybe there's genocide or not, here's the statistics that I want to read out to us, and I think this is really very important. So this is a statistics about Christian persecution in my own nation, Nigeria, according to International Society for Civil Liberties and Rule of Law. So here's what they said. 18,000 churches have been burned down since 2009. 18,000 churches. That's really very important. Also, 52,000 plus had been killed since 2009. We're talking about the Christians right now, okay? We're not talking about other groups, just the Christians. And you see, some of these figures are actually been lessened because when you have this issue of genocide or killings going on in these instances or places in Nigeria, but rest assured that what you have reported in the news is a lower figure compared to what you actually have on ground, okay? So we're talking about 52,000 people or more who have been killed since 2009. Remember that all of these statistics is looking, forward or backward from 2009. All right, and then you have about 5 million persons who have been displaced since 2009, and then of course you have also 7,000 that have been killed since 2025. That is just recently, since last year. Now these are staggering figures. Now some might be questioning this figure and saying that, is it really true? Are these things really happening? That's exactly what we're going to be taking a look at tonight. We want to see if these things are happening and what is the motivation behind it and what exactly can we do as Christians. So these are the things we're going to be taking a look at. So moving on from here, what started this whole conversation? So BMER, just as we know, had a particular discussion on September 26, 2025 on the show. And here is the exact word that is said during its program. Okay? It said that Nigeria, the fact that this issue has not gotten on people's radar is pretty amazing. Mayor said, if you don't know what is going on in Nigeria, your media source sucks. You are in a bubble. So he was talking to somebody right there. I mean, he was having a conversation and then he brought up the issue of Nigeria. Of course, we know that the issue of Israel and Palestinian issue, the Gaza issue, that has been on the news for a while. So Bimea is saying that if you're talking about this particular thing, then you are not looking at the real deal. Because the real deal is actually Nigeria. Genocide is going on in that nation. And nobody's talking about it. And that's exactly what Mea is saying. It continues. I am not a Christian, obviously he's not. But they are systematically killing Christians in Nigeria. They have killed over 100,000 since 2009. They have burned down 18,000 churches. These are Islamic Boko Haram, he said. This is so much more of a genocide attempt than what is going on in Gaza. So if you think that what is going on in Gaza is actually an issue, if you think that what is going on in Gaza is something that we should be concerned about, if you think that it is actually barbaric, then Bimea is saying that you should actually concentrate in Nigeria, because much more is actually happening right there in Nigeria, my own country, and that's where I'm staying right now. And then it continues. There's so much more than a genocide attempt than what is going on in Gaza. By the way, if you see me looking at this other side, this is where my screen is, okay? It's because the slide on the screen is not bold, so I have to look at the other side so I can read what is on my slide, okay? So they are literally attempting, thank you for that, I appreciate that, so I don't need to look at the other side again. All right, it says, they are literally attempting to wipe out the Christian population of an entire country. Where are the kids protesting this? He asked, criticizing the lack of mainstream media coverage and not in the absence of public outcry in the United States. Now, the truth of the matter is that what Bimea is actually talking about right here is something that we have been experiencing in Nigeria for a while. In fact, for over a decade, if not more. All right? But you see, this is what started the conversation last year. Immediately he made this statement, then a lot of people started talking about the genocide in Nigeria. It's as if suddenly, the curtain was actually drawn open. All right? That's exactly what happened. But then, he was not the one that started the conversation. Like, this has been in the news for a while. But then because he talked about it, and because he was serious about it, everybody started saying something about this particular issue. So we need to thank Bimea for actually mentioning this, because when they mentioned it, then people started looking into the issue of the genocide in Nigeria. But moving forward from there, if there are questions of either there are genocide in Nigeria or not, I think that the pictures and the video actually speaks for themselves. And what I'm going to be doing tonight is to show us a couple of images. Of course, I have to look at the ones that I think we can live with, okay, because there are some very gory images. All right, I'm going to be showing us some images and also some videos that actually speaks to the effect of what we're talking about. Now, here is a video showing Christians having a mass burial. I'm going to play this video for just about 2 minutes, and then we're going to be moving on from there. All right, so if somebody is asking the question, is there Christian genocide in Nigeria? This is one of the evidence to that effect. You can even see a truck moving corpses, and you can see those corpses being laid down in a ground, a place that was actually dug. I tell you, there are more gory videos, okay, saddening video, than the one I've shown right here. But you see, this is one of the realities that we need to live with. This is one of the things that we have in our own nation, my own dear country, Nigeria. We have had a lot of Christians who are going through this particular thing, and then it's not stopping. So as I'm speaking about this right now, it has not stopped. We still have people being killed. In fact, this month we still have people being killed. I'm going to be talking about that as we move on. So looking at this particular issue, I actually want us to sample a couple of attacks. All right, it's a couple of attacks that has happened over the years just a couple of them, and see how this had happened throughout the years. I'm going to be citing numbers, I'm going to be citing dates, so that we can keep track of this. We have a lot of information concerning this. But the reason why I'm doing this is because I want us to establish the fact that indeed there is a Christian genocide in Nigeria. It is not a fiction. It is not something that somebody is making up. No, it is not a fire outcry. No, not at all. It is actually what is going on in my own dear country, Nigeria. So in 2010 at Dogonahawa, now there is actually a massacre of over 500 Christians in this nation called Nigeria. I was actually privileged to visit this particular site, and I saw the burial ground of the over 500 Christians that were actually massacred. Most of them were women and children. This massacre actually took place in the middle of the night, where they were sleeping. Of course, when you're sleeping, you never know that this sort of a thing is actually coming to happen, or that is ever going to happen. You're just having your sleep. So in the middle of this night, these terrorists came into this particular place, and they slaughtered over 500 women and children and men. This happened in Nigeria in 2010. It happened in the wake of the night stroke the morning. Now, if this is not a genocide, what do you call this? It's simply a genocide. And for the most part, this place that we're talking about, Dogonahawa, is actually a Christian community. Okay, it's a Christian community, and this happened at a time when nobody actually expected. And then in December 2023, remember that this is not exhaustive. I'm just giving us a sample of these attacks. It is not exhaustive at all. In December 2023, we also have a massacres in Bokos. Bokos is actually in Jos. I was in Jos last year. Okay, we have a massacre right there. Over 200 Christians were actually killed, and 500 persons were injured. Okay, they were injured because we have other coordinated attack in 17 communities in Plateau State, Nigeria. So if somebody is saying that there is no genocide in Nigeria, that all of this stuff are made up, it is not true. Again, I have been privileged to actually go to, in fact, I've been to Bokos, okay? I've seen some of these places that were burnt. Okay, I've seen some of the Christians that were involved. I've interviewed some of the ministers and pastors who have actually involved in this. Some of them are actually victims of what actually happened. In fact, I've interviewed a person whose father was actually burnt in the church. Okay, he was in the church, and these terrorists surrounded the church and they burnt him right there in the church. Okay, so this is not a fairy tale. We're talking about things that we have seen, things that has happened, things that is actually haunting a community or different communities in Nigeria, depending on the places that were actually attacked. And then moving on from there, also you discover that in 2025, we're just talking about last year. Okay, now I have to skip a couple of attacks over the years, but then this one happened in 2025, just last year in April. There was an attack during the Palm Sunday. Okay, or we're talking about the Holy Week right there, where 51 to 54 Christians were actually killed in a village called Ziki near what? Jos. Again, these are coordinated attacks. And you know what? There was a time in Nigeria where almost every Christmas we are usually afraid because we know that there is usually going to be an attack. Yeah, there was a time in Nigeria. In fact, it still exists, because last year we're still thinking people were afraid. They can't actually want to celebrate Christmas because they are afraid that something might actually happen. There might be a terrorist attack. There might be some terrorists coming to kill people, because this is something that we have been having over and over again in this particular nation. So these are sample effects of killings that have been taking place in this dear nation of mine, Nigeria. And then in November 2025, just last year, we have over 300 students and 12 teachers that were actually adopted from St. Mary's Catholic School in the north central part of Nigeria. That actually happened in Niger State, even though we've been told that some of the students and the teachers have actually regained their freedom. Now, if this is not a calculated attack, if it is not genocide, what are you going to call this? Okay, remember that there are some stories that I've actually left out, because I want to give us a sample attack of some of the things that is actually going on in my own dear nation. All right, so what I'm going to be doing right now is to give us a case study of some of the Christian genocide that we've had in this nation. Because some are saying that some of the things that we're talking about are actually made up, but they are not. If you check the mainstream media, some of the things I'm going to be talking about tonight are actually there, well documented. Okay, go online after I'm done with this broadcast. Go online, check them out, and you discover that they are actually there. So the killing of the Christian did not just start yesterday, last year, maybe last 2 years, 10 years ago. It's been on for a particular time, and that is what we're going to be talking about tonight. And also, like I said, we're going to be taking a look at some of the historical events that lead to some of these things, and what I would actually prefer that the church do about this. So let's start with Sister Christiana. Now, Sister Christiana was actually killed on the 21st of March 2007. So Sister Christiana was actually a teacher in one of the states in Nigeria, or northern part of the nation, called Gombe. He actually went there to invigilate an examination, and this is the story of what happened to her. Okay, Christiana Oluwatoyin Oluwasesin, okay, was a Christian teacher who was lynched by the Yankalala boys for allegedly discrediting and mutilating the Quran at a secondary school in Gandu, Gombe State of Nigeria. So here's actually what happened. She was conducting an exam, okay, for a certain student. So one of the students actually came into the examination hall, and she had a bag with her. So because she does not want that student to use that bag in the examination hall, because for the most part what we do in Nigeria is that if you're conducting an exam, you're not allowed to go with any books, you're not allowed to go with any material other than your writing material, your pencil, your biro, eraser, whatever. That is what you're allowed to go in with. You're not allowed to go with textbooks or any sheet, because that would have been seen as a sort of malpractice. All right, so she actually took the bag of this particular girl and then threw the bag outside. Now immediately she did that, the girl started crying. She started crying that there was a copy of the Quran in the bag that was thrown out. So immediately the girl started crying. A couple of boys, the Yankala boys, they actually came out and they started shouting Allah Akbar. Before you know it, Sister Christiana was actually dragged out of the classroom, and then she ran out because she wanted to escape. She knew that danger is already looming. She wanted to escape, okay? She ran into the principal office, and the boys told the principals that if you don't release her, we are going to kill you. We're going to burn your office down. Okay, but because the principal cannot do anything, he was overpowered. Eventually the principal had to give Christiana to these boys. And what did they do? They actually draw Christiana out, they strip her naked, and they killed her. Okay, but you see, when they killed her, they didn't just leave her alone, they also burnt her to death. This is actually what happened to Christiana. Christiana was actually stabbed. She was stabbed to death, and then when she was stabbed to death, eventually she was burned to death. Now, this event is nothing new in Nigeria. Like I said, it is one of the events in Nigeria that constitute or that reminds of what is going on in the northern part of Nigeria right now, especially the Christian genocide. So it's not something that is new. It has been the modus operandi of these guys, and for the most part, these are not adults here. These are children in a secondary school. Can you imagine that? Children in secondary school carrying out this sort of judgment, assassinating, killing, and also lynching. Okay, so this is something that we've been facing in this particular nation, and it's nothing new at all. Now, if you don't call this genocide, what would you call this? Just because a Christian teacher is invigilating and he threw out a particular bag because he felt that that bag is going to constitute malpractice, and because of that you decide to stab her to death. Okay, before you even stab her to death, you stripped her naked, stab her to death, and then you burnt her. I mean, what can you call that if it is not genocide against the Christian? So that is the story of Christiana Oluwatoyin. But you see, that is not the end of the story. Like I said, I can't bring all of the events that we've witnessed in this nation. I'm just giving us a couple of these events, okay? Notable of them all. We have other events that happen, but I'm just giving us a sample of this event. So on the 12th of May 2022, we have a case of a particular sister, Deborah Samuel Yakubu by name. What happened to Deborah? On the 12th of May, like I mentioned, Deborah Samuel was actually a second-year Christian student in Nigeria, and she was actually killed by a mob of fellow students in Sokoto after being accused of blaspheming against Islam. Now, note what I'm saying again. the people that killed Deborah were not grown-up jihadists, okay? When I say grown-up jihadists, we're not talking about people who have, people you're actually thinking have been trained, okay, in jihadic activities, all right? These are students, okay, in the higher institution, students in the university. These are the ones that actually killed this particular lady. And why did they kill her? She was actually accused of blaspheming the Prophet of Islam. Yakubu was alleged to have posted a message on the WhatsApp group that some classmates considered offensive to the Islamic Prophet Muhammad. The message reportedly criticized religious discussion taking place in a student group that she believes should have focused strictly on academic matters. So, Yakubu was actually criticizing the fact that nobody should have posted on a WhatsApp platform that is meant for academic discussion anything religious. That was what she did. She was actually rebuking the Muslims right there, saying that you do not have the right to actually post religious stuff in a WhatsApp group that is meant for us students to get information about our academics, examination, and everything related to the school. That was what she said. And because of that, that same day, she was removed from a security room because at the point in time, the Muslims, okay, the students, were actually angry, and they told her that if she does not recount, they are going to kill her. And she was like, what am I going to recount? What have I done wrong? Okay, so she was actually removed from a security room at Shehu Shagari College of Education in Sokoto. This is where it actually happened, where she had been sheltered for protection initially, okay? But because these mob are usually more powerful, when they grow, when they come together and they are shouting Allah Akbar, they usually overpower the security forces, okay? Because they were able to overpower the security forces, all right, they were able to kill this particular lady. How was she killed? Okay, Deborah was actually stoned to death, and after that, she was also burnt. Remember what happened to Oluwatoyin? Remember what happened to Christiana? She was stripped naked, stabbed, and then she was actually burnt. That's the same thing that happened, almost the same thing that happened to Deborah. Deborah was actually stoned to death. In fact, we have the videos of this online. I cannot show it right here because, I mean, YouTube might actually flag this program for showing such a gory video. All right? And then we have students, okay, fellow students of Yakubu showing themselves on camera. One of them is actually holding a matchbox. Let me show you. There you go. That is the guy right there. He was showing a matchbox that he was one of the person that was responsible for lighting the fire. He was actually proud of what he did because I feel that is defending the honor of the prophet. But you know the interesting thing about this particular issue, even though it causes a sort of a furore in Nigeria, you know, all over the place it was being discussed, two of these guys, that's the student, were actually arrested and they were taken to the court. But you know what? About 36 lawyers, 36 Muslims lawyers rose up to defend these guys. And eventually, the case concerning this particular lady, Deborah, is actually out of court right now. Even if it's still within the court, we don't know what has come of it. Because right now, we don't know what has happened to those guys. We don't know what has happened to, you know, the lawyers. We don't know what the case is actually. We don't even know where it's heading to right now because nobody's talking about it again. All right? Nobody's talking about it. Can you imagine about 36 lawyers rising up to defend students, fellow students that killed their own students, okay, fellow students, and then burnt her to death? I mean, can you imagine something like that in a nation called Nigeria? This is actually what we're going through. This is actually what we are seeing in this nation. All right? Now, if you don't call that a Christian genocide, what would you call that? What would you call a group of men, okay, male, boys, coming together, Muslim boys, okay, male, coming together, all right, to stone a person to death, and apart from that, they're also burning her as well? What do you call that if it is not genocide? Remember, this is not the first of its kind, and then it's not the last, because I just told you about Christiana, and here we have talking about Deborah. Okay, I'm going to skip up the story because there are a couple of things that we could say about that. So, in 2006, this is actually very, very, important. I need to talk about this. We remember what happened in Denmark when a cartoon about the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, was actually published. Of course, we know what that caused all over the world. But then Nigerian Christians have their own fair share of this particular incident. Even though the cartoon was published in Denmark, the Nigerian Christians were actually killed. Okay? Christians in Nigeria were killed over a cartoon that was actually published in Denmark. Here is actually the story. You can see a couple of of course, I'm not going to put all the cartoons right there. I just want to show you a couple of, the images of the stories about that. On the 18th of February 2006, about 16 people were killed in northern part of Nigeria during a protest by Muslims over the cartoon satirizing the Prophet of Islam. Most of the deaths occurred, of course, in rioting in Maiduguri, the capital of northeastern Borno State. Now, one person actually died in a similar riot in Katsina State. So we're talking about riot that took place, in some places in Nigeria, but most especially in Maiduguri. Now, think about this. Think about this. Imagine something happened in the United States of America, all right? Imagine that a certain Christian, maybe a Christian or a so-called Christian, actually did something, all right? And because of the action of that particular Christian, of course, the people who actually publish these cartoons aren't Christians. They are not Christians, okay? But for the fact that the cartoon is about Muhammad, the Muslims in Nigeria felt that the Christians in Nigeria are responsible for this and they should be held accountable. And because of that, the Christians in Nigeria were killed just because of the cartoon of Muhammad that was published in Denmark. Now again, if this is not genocide, what are you going to call this? Okay? So if something happened in some other country, we in Nigeria, we are actually going to bear the brunt of that. Why? Because we are actually Christians. Now, apart from that, 11 churches were actually burnt down during the protest, and the Christian businesses were also targeted. In fact, BBC actually did mention that the protest, which actually began initially peacefully, okay, in Maiduguri, okay, eventually is what led to what we're actually talking about right now. So the Muslims were actually going around, having allegedly a peaceful protest, but after a while, the peaceful protest actually turned bloody. Before you know it, people were being killed, Christian businesses were being looted, and a lot of people died. In fact, one group actually threw a tire around one man, poured gas on him, and they set him ablaze. Again, if this is not Christian genocide, what are you going to call this? This is laser targeted. I mean, what is the crime of the Christians? Why should it be the Christians every now and then? I'm going to create a caveat, because at the end of the day, if you're watching this right now, you're going to be asking the question, but had the Muslims not been killed? We're going to be talking about that. Don't worry. If you have that question at the back of your mind, I'm going to be addressing it, okay? Now, why do all of these things matter? Why are we talking about this? Why do we need to discuss this issue? Now, here's the reason why it matters. So, you have Reverend Johanna Moore and also Rabbi Abraham Cooper. They actually wrote a very important book. In fact, I'm going to recommend it. The book is actually on my shelf right there. I'm going to be recommending this book for everybody, okay, if you're interested in what is going on in Nigeria, okay? This book was actually written about, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. But then it mirrors exactly what is going on in Nigeria. In fact, they have been talking about the Christian genocide in Nigeria before now. So here's actually what they said. Furthermore, Nigeria has the largest Christian population in Africa. Now think about that. If Nigeria has the largest Christian population in Africa, then there's something that you need to make of that. Okay, there's something you need to make of that. It therefore means that there is already a concentration on Nigeria or the Nigerian Christian. Why? Because we have the largest population of Christians. So they further mentioned that if nothing is done, Christians will not be the last victim. So when we're talking about this activity of the genocide of Christians in Nigeria, what they are saying is that if nothing is done, it's not going to be about Christians alone. Because once this genocide have been concentrated on the Christians and the Christians have been thoroughly dealt with, then it's going to move to other religious faiths as well. Okay? So they say that Christians will not be the last victim. For no person of any faith, either Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Jew, or no faith at all, will be spared by the ravages of these terrorists who believe that their profane mission of death is a service to God. Remember what John said in John chapter 14, I think. sorry, I can't even remember right now. I was thinking it's 16, but John 16 and John 14 is actually talking about the Paraclete, the Holy Spirit. But then Jesus did mention that a time will come when some certain persons would actually kill you, and they would think that they are doing service to God. All right, and that's exactly what they are mirroring right here, because these jihadists, these terrorists, actually feel that when they are killing the Christians, they are doing service to God. And this is exactly why this matters, because it is not going to end with the Christians. Yes, they are targeting the Christians right now, but their major goal, or the major aim of doing all of this, is to make sure that they take over the place for Allah. And we're going to be seeing a bit of this in Islam. Now, somebody might be asking right now, where did this start? I mean, what is the precursor for all of this genocide that we have in Nigeria? Why are we having this issue in Nigeria? Do we have an history of some certain things that can give us a clue to what is happening in Nigeria? And the answer to that is yes. I want to take us back the memory lane, okay? As far back as the 18th century. Yeah, I want to take us back to as far back to the 18th century to see what actually happened, because we have a precursor to some of these things, and that is actually what we're going to be talking about right now. So let's talk about this man you're seeing on the screen at the moment, okay? We're talking about Sheikh Usman Dan Fodio. All right. Now, Sheikh Usman Dan Fodio is actually a prominent Islamic scholar in the northern part of Nigeria. In fact, Usman Dan Fodio was a Fulani Islamic scholar. He's a preacher, he's a reformer, and is actually born in Gobril. Gobril in actually the present-day northern part of Nigeria. Now, one thing you need to know about this man is that he's not just a scholar, as you're going to see. You discover that this guy, or this man, this sheikh, is actually a reformer. And there's no way you're going to be talking about Islam in Nigeria or the jihadist activities of Islam in Nigeria without talking about this man. Okay? You've got to talk about him. You just got to talk about him. So he belonged to the Qadriya Sufi order and became widely respected for his deep knowledge. No, put it up, please. Thank you. So I did need to mention this. As you can see, I'm sweating right now. So my wife actually wanted to help me with the fan. I told her no, because if it does that, it's going to affect the audio right there. So please just bear with me. So, like I said, he belonged to the Qadriya Sufi order and became widely respected for his deep knowledge of Islamic jurisprudence, theology, and spirituality. Now, in the late 18th century, he preached across the Hausa state, especially in Gorbi, calling for the following. Now, what did he call for? Please, I want you to note the following things that he called for. Number one, he called for strict adherence to the Quran and the Sunnah. Okay? Strict adherence to the Quran and the Sunnah. Why is he doing this? Now, Usman Dan Fodio felt that the Muslims of his own time were already engaged in bid'ah, meaning they are already engaged in innovation. They are not practicing Islam in its pristine form. And he wanted them to practice Islam in its pristine form. So he wanted them to adhere to what? To the Quran and the Sunnah. Secondly, he wants to have a moral reform among Muslim rulers. Why? Because according to him, the Muslim ruler are not actually morally upright any longer, because they are not living their life according to the dictates of the Quran and the Hadith. And then going on from there, he also wants to have what? A sort of elimination of un-Islamic practices. That's talking about syncretism, heavy taxation, and also oppression. According to Usman Dan Fodio, he felt that some Muslims were actually mixing some other things with Islam, especially those who are engaged in folk Islam. So he wanted them to practice Islam purely without mixing it with anything. He also felt that there is heavy taxation on people, and then he wanted that to be out of the way. He also saw a lot of people who have been oppressed. So he has a mind for the oppressed as well. And then he wanted to make sure that all of that is taken out of the way. And you see, because of this particular, goals and plans that they have, especially for the oppressed, a lot of people endear themselves to him, because they see him as somebody that is upright, somebody that loves the people, and he wants the good of the people. All right? And he also wants to have what? A sort of greater access to Islamic education, including for those of the women folks. So he gathered a large following of students, Fulani pastoralists, scholars, and oppressed peasants. No, when he has all of these people behind him, then it became powerful to do all of the things that he wanted to do. So moving on from here, we discover that after the persecution intensified, because when he was doing all of the things he was doing, he was actually persecuted. Okay, People were not actually listening to him, especially some of the leaders, all right, in power. They were persecuting him, they were persecuting his follower. Just like, Muhammad, according to the standard Islamic narration, and his followers were actually persecuted in Mecca. The same thing was done for Usman Dan Fodio. So because he was actually persecuted, Dan Fodio and his followers, they migrated, what is known as the Hijra. They migrated from Gorbi to Gudu in 1804. This is very important. This migration actually happened in 1804. And it was also in 1804 that Usman Dan Fodio launched his what? Jihad. So this marked the formal beginning of his jihad, modeled partly on the Prophet Muhammad's migration from Mecca to Medina. Now, I want you to see a pattern between Dan Fodio right here and also the life of Muhammad. Remember, when Muhammad was actually in Mecca, and according to the Islamic narrative, he received the revelation from Allah. He began to tell the people, the pagan in Mecca, that they need to worship Allah and forbid all the other gods, forsake all the other gods. Of course, he was met with obstruction, he was met with difficulty, and then they were persecuting him. The persecution was so much that Muhammad had to send some of his followers, from Mecca to Abyssinia for asylum, okay? And eventually some of them actually have to move to Yathrib, which was eventually renamed to Medina, okay, the city of the prophet. So this sort of activity, or this parallelism, is seen, or let me say this similarity is actually seen between the life of Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, and also Usman Dan Fodio. Usman Dan Fodio was persecuted. He actually moved from Gorbi to Gudu in 1804, and after that he launched a jihad. Was that not what Muhammad did? Muhammad actually launched jihad when he got to Medina, okay? Because now he has military might, he has the people, and then he can confront those people in Mecca. So the movement, that of Dan Fodio, quickly transformed from reformist preaching into a military struggle. Now, if you are thinking that this happened far away in one Arabian country, okay, maybe in the Middle Eastern country, no, it happened in my own nation, Nigeria. This happened in my nation, Nigeria. Yeah, it happened in this nation I'm living in right now. This is where it happened. Okay, this man was mirroring and patterning the life of Muhammad. So his forces defeated several Hausa rulers, and by 1808 they had already established what is known as the Sokoto Caliphate. As I speak to you right now, the Sokoto Caliphate exists till now. And then the leader of the Sokoto Caliphate is actually the Amir al-Islam, or the Amir al-Muslimin of Nigeria. That is the leader of the entire Muslim in Nigeria. So this place is there existing today. So what does that mean? It means that the Sokoto Caliphate is a testimony to the jihad of Usman Dan Fodio. And of course, Usman Dan Fodio does not just want to limit his jihad to the northern part of Nigeria. If it is possible, he wanted to take the whole of Nigeria. Why? Because he want the whole of Nigeria to be Islamic. Alright? Now, what did he do, or what did the center do? The center actually implemented Islamic law, or what is known as the Sharia, promoted Islamic scholarship and education, and also it became a major center of Islamic learning even till now. Now, before I begin to talk about this person, Mike Tassini, I wanted to have a reflection right now. Because some of you might be thinking, did all of these things happen in Nigeria? Yeah, it did happen in Nigeria. But then if you're thinking about this, you're also thinking of the Prophet of Islam. And you can see some similarities right there. And this will help you to connect to some of the things that is happening in a nation called Nigeria. If you're seeing some of these killings, there is a motivation. Some certain persons have done some certain things in the past that is motivating these other Muslims to go ahead to do the very same thing. Now, a caveat right here. Am I saying that all Muslims are terrorists? Am I saying that all Muslims are the ones that want to kill Christians? I'm not saying that, for goodness sake. I know some Muslims who are peace-loving. In fact, a lot of Muslims in Nigeria are actually peace-loving. They don't even like the activities of the Boko Haram. They don't like the activities of the Lakurawa. They don't like the activities of the Islamic terrorists, okay? They don't like it, okay? But then, for the fact that we have these guys doing these certain things, and they are looking at the Quran and the Hadith as the constitution, or to back what they are doing, it's actually a problem. Because if you look at what Usman Dan Fodio had done, he wants to go back to the pristine Islam, or what you will call the days of the Rashidun, okay? the four rightly guarded caliphs. He wants to go to that day where this place or this nation can be guided or be ruled by Sharia. That is what he wants to achieve. That is what he wants to do. So that is the story of Uthman Dan Fodio. And you might be thinking, why am I going through these stories? It's because I want you to understand the reason why we're having what we're having in our nation called Nigeria. It didn't just start in a day. There is a precursor. Certain things happen that actually influences what we're going through in this nation right now. Let's quickly talk about the Maitasini because my time is almost up and I need to rush this, okay? In the mid-20th century, we have a man called Maitasini. Now, that is actually, his nickname. His real name, of course, is actually a very interesting person because he's also a Malam. His real name is Muhammad Mawa. He's actually known or popularly known as Maitasini. Now, Maitasini actually means the one who curses in the Hausa language. He was an Islamic preacher, originally from the northern Cameroon, but then he settled in Kano, northern part of Nigeria. Now, when he settled in Kano, he actually has a feel for this set of people. The urban poor, that is the poor people, he has a feel for them. The migrants, okay, the unemployed youth, and the marginalized community in other part of Nigeria. Now, if you look at this, you see a similarity between Maitasini and also Uthman Dan Fodio. You see their followers, the urban poor, the poor people, the migrants, the unemployed. These are the people who are oppressed. Now, what am I bringing out of this? One of the things I want to bring out of it is that sometimes these leaders, okay, these Islamic leaders, the scholars, the jihadists, they look to the people who are actually poor, they look to people who are actually marginalized, okay, the unemployed, and they tell them that don't worry, if you're unemployed right now, there's something that we can do. We can fight in the cause of Allah to change the narrative, okay? We can overturn everything, and then we're going to have an establishment of the Sharia. And once we have an establishment of the Sharia, we're going to have justice. We're not going to be having this inequality that is going on in our nation. These are the things that they tell them. And once they tell them about these things, they gather these followers. Before you know it, the jihad actually starts. So his movement is actually known as Yan Tassin. Okay, that is the people that he was actually putting together. And then Maitasini actually was a radical preacher because initially he was he was engaged in his preaching. He would actually preach about Islam and all of that. But then at a point in time, he became a radical preacher. Now, somebody might be asking the question, was he not a radical preacher before? Did he change to become a radical preacher at the point in time? Now, the truth of the matter is that, yes, it might be a gentleman who is actually preaching Islam at the point in time, but that radicalism has always been there. But they don't actually come out with radicalism when they don't have enough people to engage them, enough people to support them. So when they have enough people, then they come out with the radical message. All right? And because of that, he was preaching against the Western education and modern technology. He was preaching against that. And that is what we're going to be seeing in the Boko Haram since we're going to be talking about them. I need to move very fast. Also, he denounced the Nigerian state and its constitution. It's very typical. All right? He criticized the established Muslim leaders and scholars. Why? Because he believed that they are not following the religion of Islam any longer. He claimed to possess prophetic authority, meaning that he has some certain things that he has within himself that other leaders should look up to. Why? Because he has a prophetic mandate and a prophetic authority, and then he should be respected. And then his teaching actually differ from the Sunni Orthodox Islam that is practiced in the northern part of Nigeria. Now, although Maitasini did not formally declare historical jihad, just like Uthman Dan Fodio actually did, but then the movement that he had and the followers that he had became violently confrontational. All right, and then we have this deadly activity that happened in the 1980s, especially in Kano State, in another part of Nigeria. There was a deadly clash. And as a result of that clash, the policemen and the security, the military, they actually confronted the follower of Maitasini. And because of that, over 4,000 persons actually died. This is what was reported in the news. Of course, it's over that. But of course, this is what we have in the news. 4,000 persons actually died. And then, in this particular clash, Maitasini himself actually was murdered. Now, because of time, because I'm supposed to have a reflection on Maitasini, because of time, I'm just going to talk about the Boko Haram, and then we're going to wrap it up right here. The Boko Haram. This particular group actually, started up in 2022, sorry, not 2022, 2002. And then you can see them right there. You can see them in the camouflage, of course, the one that have gotten from the soldiers that have been killed. You can see the, you know, the machine guns right there. You can see the the guns that they have in the background. This particular group was actually created by a particular Malam. His name is Muhammad Yusuf in 2002 in Maduguri. All right. And then when he did that, initially the name of their group in Arabic is Jamatu Al-Sunnah Lidawatu Wal Jihad. That is, the people committed to the propagation of the Prophet's teaching and jihad. That is actually what they call themselves. But you know what? They were eventually nicknamed Boko Haram. And Boko Haram means Western education is forbidden. Yusuf preached against Western style of education, democracy, and what he thought was actually corruption in the governance in Nigeria. And then initially, that movement was actually functioning as a radical state within a particular mosque. But before you know it, they went into a full-blown radical and, you know, jihadic activity, and they started killing, you know, a lot of people. Some might be asking, and all of this is in Islamic, why are the Muslims are killed? The reason why they are killed is because they believe that any Muslim that is not supporting what they are doing is already a mushrik and should therefore be killed. I'm going to be wrapping it up because I can see my moderator right there on the screen. So let me just move it to what, you know. So what must the church do? Here's what the church should do. The church should actually pray for the persecuted Christians. All right. If you're in the West right now, you're thinking that this is not happening to me. It does not really matter. It is not happening to me. No, this is actually wrong. You should pray for the persecuted Christians that are actually going through this. We need your prayers. It's really very important. Then you need to support the persecuted Christians. I was in Jos last year, and I was with an organization that had done a couple of, in fact, tremendous work in helping to rebuild the houses of Christians who have been persecuted. This particular organization has been able to rebuild over 75 houses. They are doing a lot of work. And there's some other organizations that are doing the very same thing. We need to support this organization so that the Christians can be supported. So we need support. Yes, prayer, and then we need support and funding as well. Then we need to educate Christians on Islamic jihad. A lot of Christians don't know what is going on. They feel that these are just radicalized Muslims. They don't understand the Quran. They are, you know, they are fundamentalists. But you see, these things are actually grounded in the Quran and the Hadith, the Sunnah of the Prophet. And then we need to reach out to the Muslims with the gospel. When we do this, it will help us to, you know, expose the lies of the radicalization in Islam. And the gospel, when the gospel penetrates the heart of a radical person or somebody who is on the verge of being a radical, it helps them to realize that there is no way in this particular activity, and the only salvation they can have is in Jesus Christ. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful. I know I've taken a couple of time, but again, Pastor George, it's a privilege for me to be here. I'm so grateful. I'm not taking it for granted. Thank you, Brother Kelvin. And I also want to appreciate Luis, LIONHEART, thank you for the presentation. And also, Brother Ayo Shudikwe, thank you for all that you've done. God bless you. I hope this has been helpful. It's KOREDE here, over and out.
You have done a good job of really kind of bringing it personal and bringing it home to what Islamic, what we just call it Islamic fundamentalism, looks like in practice, in real time. You guys are living it in Nigeria, and I'm thankful for your last slide, because I was going to ask you how can we help, but yeah, you went through that. And so with that said, just hey, how can other people find you? How can we find your work, and just ways we can help? Okay,
okay, so the information about how you can find me is actually on the screen right there. So I'm actually on YouTube by the name Seasoned Apologist, and in fact that's the name all across the social media platform for the ministry that I run, Seasoned Apologist. But then I have a Facebook account, a personal Facebook account, KOREDE OLAWOYIN, just in case if you want to reach out to me personally. Yeah, so basically that's how I can be reached out to. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you on the panel discussion later on.
Amen. Thank you.